Bonjour, bienvenue. Welcome to today's segment on career basics, leveraging your learning and performance management plans. Mettre à profit vos plans d'apprentissage et de gestion du rendement. My name is Gina Scaramuzzi, and I am currently the acting manager of ICMS, Values and Ethics and Organizational Development at the Canadian Grain Commission. And I am coming to you today from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm joining you from today are the territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples. And I am on the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation, and we acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake First Nation. So I'm very pleased to be with you today and with our panelists to have a conversation on learning plans and how to leverage them. And today's session is brought to you in response to the overwhelming success of the Career Bootcamp and your needs on the fact that how do you learn more about leveraging this great tool? So I'm really excited for the conversation over the next hour. And as was noted in the chat function, please share your comments in our chat space, and you can also pose your questions in the question and answer button in the language of your choice, and you can vote for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. So today we have 3 panelists joining us who will share their expertise, and I think we'll get started by meeting our panelists. So first I'm going to ask you, Annie, to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Gina. My name is Annie Theriault, and I'm joining you today from Moncton, New Brunswick. So I'm recognizing that I'm on the land of Mi'kmaq people today, joining you from Moncton, where the weather is really crappy. So I'm super happy to be with you because then I don't see outside. So it's all good, a very nice day overall. So Gina, I've been with the school since 2004 in many different functions with a background in learning and education. And also I think I've played all the roles there is possible to play within one department. So right now I'm a member of the faculty for the school, delivering courses for leadership development programs, and also with up to 20 years experience in management. So I'll wear my learning hat for you today, but also my supervisor, manager hat if you need me to. And so I'm very happy to be with you. Et je serai contente de répondre aux questions dans les 2 langues officielles. Alors, n'hésitez pas si vous voulez avoir une conversation en français aujourd'hui. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much. Why don't we go over to you, Amy?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Rankin. I am Senior Policy Analyst in the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer, responsible for, amongst other things, the Directive on Performance Management. Alors, c'est depuis une dizaine d'années que je travaille dans le domaine de gestion de rendement et apprentissage. Alors, je suis très contente d'être ici aujourd'hui pour cette discussion avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci, Amy. Et Nathalie?
Bonjour, je suis Nathalie Faucon. I am the current Acting Senior Manager, Performance and Talent Management Program Delivery and Systems. We're in the People Management Systems and Processes sector at Okra with Amy. That is such a mouthful. But in summary, my team and I facilitate or support performance management and talent management in the public service. We help bridge all of the policy work that Amy does into the various departments. I've been in the federal public service since 2008. I've been active in performance and talent management since then. And if you found me on GC Connects, you're going to see that I am passionate about making performance and talent management meaningful and relevant. And ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle je suis là aujourd'hui. La gestion du rendement. Elle en vaut l'investissement et j'espère que cette présentation pourra vous inspirer parce que oui, on va parler des plans d'apprentissage, mais on va aussi parler des ententes de rendement.
Okay, merci. So as Nathalie just mentioned, right, she talked about learning plans and performance management agreements. And in your department, these tools may have a different name, but they are essentially the same thing. We know our friends at the Canada Revenue Agency have these tools. They may be called something different. That may be your reality in your department, but the tools are the same. And so just keep that in mind as we kind of go through today's session. What you will have heard is there's decades of experience around this table. And so we're going to get started with hearing from our panelists. So the first question is going to you, Nathalie. Tell us, what is a performance agreement at the heart of it for, employees who may not be that familiar with it? Explain it to us.
Okay, so as you said, we have very many names for it. I call it a performance agreement. I also call it a PA. Most importantly, your performance agreement is a living document. At the beginning of the year or the beginning of a new position, what you're going to do is you're going to set out work objectives with your manager. Those are recorded in your PA. Those work objectives are at the center of your performance agreement. They spell out what's expected of you, what you need to do, but your performance agreement has other components of it. It also houses how you're supposed to be doing that. So the core competencies that we expect every public servant to espouse. So that's how you do your work. And they're, like I said, the same for everybody. Now, your performance agreement will come out. It will come out at mid-year because that's an official checkpoint. It will come out at year end. Those are annual assessments against what your work objectives are and how you've done your work, the core competencies. Those are recorded in your performance agreement. But I mentioned that your PA is a living document. It can be adjusted, modified, enhanced, and I'm going to say pulled off the shelf. It might be housed in an electronic document, but I really mean pull it off the shelf, discuss it regularly. Own it, and don't let it gather dust. Make sure you understand your performance agreement, what's in it. Make sure you have played an active role in creating it, checking in regularly with your manager on how you're doing and what you're doing. So that's what your performance agreement is there for. It's a tool for you and your manager to really steer what you're going to be doing.
Thank you. I can see that there's already questions coming in. And so just a bit of housekeeping. We will get to your questions in about 20 minutes. So, you can vote on those questions and keep sending them. We will definitely dedicate some time today to answer those questions. So thank you on explaining, that performance agreement. And I know I've just been reminded that I need to probably dust mine off as well and take a look and see what's in there as I've, changed roles throughout the year and had an acting assignment. And we know COVID sometimes has brought forward other opportunities and work to do. And so it's good a reminder. Thank you to do that. So Annie, this next question is for you. Qu'est-ce que c'est un plan d'apprentissage? What is a learning plan?
Bien, merci Gina. Alors, comme Nathalie a mentionné, l'objectif du plan de rendement, c'est vraiment d'établir les objectifs de rendement. Alors, le plan d'apprentissage consiste à savoir quels apprentissages avez-vous besoin de faire pour accomplir ce rendement-là. So, in your learning plan, you'll find what learning you need to do to accomplish your objectives. So, same as Nathalie mentioned, this is a living evergreen document where you record what are your learning needs that you've identified. So those learning needs could be for your actual job. This job you're doing now, anything you need to learn to accomplish this job better. Maybe it's for your next job, or maybe it's for your dream job. What are your aspirations and what do you need to get there throughout your career? Could also be a long-term goal. So short-term, medium, long-term goals are acceptable in a learning plan. Then you record in it what are your intentions. Alors, comment vous allez réaliser ces objectifs-là? Ça va être par quels moyens vous allez décider d'y arriver. Quelles actions allez-vous prendre? When is it going to happen? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? If you know these details, you can insert it in your plan, or you can leave a placeholder. For example, for the Federal Youth Network sessions, you'd want a placeholder to make sure that you record that in your learning plan so that when the session is broadcasted, you have already permission to go. So that could be proactively something to think about. And at the end of this plan, you have two people who will agree on it, your manager and yourself. So usually when the manager signs on your plan for the year, it's usually for a year, but it could be including longer term. So they will sign to say they will allowing you the resources you need to accomplish this plan, meaning the time, the resources, money if needed, that can be negotiated. And when you sign it, you agree to accomplish what's in it. Again, it's evergreen. As Nathalie mentioned, there's actually normally at least twice a year a chance to go back to it at mid-year review. Mais ça peut toujours être ajusté, ça peut être changé selon le contexte. Peut-être si vous changez d'emploi, c'est le temps de revoir votre plan. Peut-être si vous avez réalisé tous vos objectifs, c'est le temps d'en ajouter. C'est le temps aussi de changer le contrat en cours de route. So it's always possible throughout the year to adjust and adapt it and adopt it and to have this agreement. Again, it's an evergreen document with all you agreed upon is recorded.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like a lot of work, right? I mean, this is something that is living. We should be reviewing it. Sounds, our managers, our supervisors are spending a lot of time. Employees are spending a lot of time. So Amy, tell us, what is the purpose of all of this, of learning and a performance agreement? Why have we placed, as the public service, such an emphasis on this?
Thanks, Gina. That's a great question. It's twofold. One, there is the individual aspect of having a plan in place that is ties what supports, what training, what new knowledge you may need to do your job in a given year. What experiences you may need to get over the course of the year. To support you in meeting your objectives and being able to actively demonstrate the core competencies. But at the same time, it also helps your manager and your organization plan for what the needs of their employees are and where there might be gaps and how that should be, or how that could be fulfilled, not necessarily on an individual level, but if there are organizational approaches or needs that could be fulfilled. So if there's an identification of a particular subject area in a team where multiple employees have identified, instead of organizing one-off attendance at a conference or at a particular course, management may decide to do something collectively for the team. So having an understanding of what employees are looking for, how it links up to the work that they're doing is going to help with planning and going to help managers support employees in the best possible way to in alignment with your work objectives and the business objectives of your team for the year. So.
Excellent. So, Annie said that it's important that your learning plan supports your performance agreement. And Natalie kind of gave us that great explanation of what a performance agreement is. So Natalie, what does a performance agreement conversation look like? And how do employees prepare for it so that, it can do all the things that Amy talks about and achieve all those short, medium, and long-term goals, potentially your dream job that Annie talked about. Alors, à quoi ressemble une conversation sur l'entente de rendement et comment s'y préparer?
C'est un partenariat and it's a shared responsibility. C'est vraiment entre le gestionnaire et l'employé et c'est une discussion it's dual. It's really both players are very active. One of the things that's really important, I mentioned earlier, there are 3 official stopgaps, but that discussion is ongoing. It could be at the corner of your desk. It could be scheduled regularly, but it's ongoing because what you want to know is where you are, how you're doing, and what if any adjustments you need to do. So don't shy away from having regular discussions. And you may even want to instigate regular discussions with your managers on your performance, okay? Contrary to what some believe, performance management is more than that 3 conversations a year. Okay. You should be having those regular discussions with your managers. You want to check in on how you're doing. You also want to discuss what you need from your manager. If these are the work objectives, what do I need in my learning plan? And if my work objectives changes, because as Amy says, you have to relate them to the business priorities. If the business priorities change, so what does that mean for me? You know, I just heard that there's a new priority. What does that mean for my performance agreement? What does that mean for my learning plan? Okay. Now, to help you prepare, I would recommend, and we'll post this, but there's a really neat, and I have to admit, I found this page today, and I'm really happy I did. It's been part of our regular panoply of resources, but it's called the Employee Self-Assessment on Progress. And we'll make sure you have that link, but it's the ongoing conversation and what it is I need to do to check in. It's really interesting.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see there's lots of questions coming in, and we will get to them. I just have a couple of more kind of items I want to hear from our panelists from. And so Amy, who decides on an employee's work objectives and writes the narrative around that?
So as Natalie said, there is shared accountability for establishing your work objectives and your performance agreement, your learning as part of your performance agreement and in your learning plan through the year. But ultimately, the work that you are assigned and expected to do is done so by your manager in alignment with your organization's priorities and business objectives. Now, we all know this past year has been different. I'll use that word. So a lot of you may have performance agreements right now that reflect what you would have been doing in a normal year. Now is a good time to start the conversation about what else you may have done, what might not have been done because of shifting priorities, to make sure that that's accurately reflected in your performance agreement. We all did a lot of learning this past year because we had to. We had to figure out how to work collaboratively while working remotely. We had to increase our agility in terms of responding to new and ever-changing priorities. So things like that, and related back to what Natalie mentioned in the self-assessment tool, those are the types of things that you want to have ready when you're having that conversation with your manager. So a mental reminders or mental notes of what you have accomplished through the year, what changed, and what on-the-job learning did you do, are all really important. Alors, c'est tellement important d'être ouverte à les changements, de prendre note de vos défis pendant l'année, où les changements ont pris place et comment ça a eu un effet sur votre travail et vos priorités pour l'année. C'est des choses très importantes que vous pouvez prendre à la discussion avec votre gestionnaire pour l'évaluation de rendement à la fin d'année.
And just to follow up, and I know we're going to get to the questions, but I think it might be a good chance to just kind of get some clarification points. So if you've changed jobs, right, this is an evergreen document, or perhaps you've been pulled into an acting, or, you know, should you be updating that plan? And also, how specific is the wording in those kind of objectives? Like if you perhaps, you know, there's like the goals of your unit, and these are the objectives of every team member on that unit. But of course, you know, we all know there's groups and levels and classification. And so how do you kind of distinguish that, or what should an employee look for so that, you know, they understand kind of their role in achieving that objective based on their current position?
So the public service performance management application, which is used by all organizations in the core public service, although not by Canada Revenue Agency and some of the others. But it has not only space for work objectives, it also has space for performance indicators. So when you have a team where you might have more overarching work objectives, you can really drill down, and you should be using the performance indicators to get to the specifics of what your job is. That's a way to differentiate the type of work that you're doing from your colleague who may sit next to you, who may also be administrative officer, but you're working on different files. So that's where that differentiation comes in, is when there are team or generic objectives. It's about the performance indicators for your specific job is one way that you can have that discussion and help differentiate that work and take into account the specifics of your job.
Okay, great, thank you. And Annie, last question to you before we get to the questions from our participants. So what kind of activities can you include, or an employee include, in their learning plan? I know there's also a question on, some perhaps no-cost learning options in the Government of Canada. Alors, quel type d'activité est-ce que les employés peuvent inclure dans leur plan d'apprentissage?
Okay, Gina, I'm going to try to go slow, but the list is as long as your imagination. What's for sure, it's a learning plan is way more than a list of courses you want to attend to. So I'm going to go through the list in English and then in French quickly. I can even put it in the chat later for people as a reference, but there's definitely courses that you could decide to go to, paid one and free one. What I mean by free is that Canada School of Public Service is offering courses for public servants that are free of charge to the learner. So you can check on the Canada School website for that. And I think Marcela just put it in the chat there. Thank you for that. And paid courses means something provided by a professional company, could be college, could be university. Someone was asking, could my department pay for that? If it's somehow related to your job or your career in the public service, it is possible. They could pay for the fees and you go on your own time, or they could cover you the time and you pay for the fees. So there's all sorts of different arrangements that could be negotiated. Now that's for courses, but you can learn a great deal through committees, whether they're departmental or interdepartmental, through different networks like this network, like the communication network, like the National Managers Community Network. A lot of different professions have their own network that you could learn if you join. By job shadowing, bring me to your meeting is something that I said once to my director. I want to know what's going on in management committee, what's happening there. Can you bring me? I'll be a fly on the wall, I won't say anything. Mentoring is also important to find people that can share their experience with you. Coaching, which is a more structured approach to help you develop your own solutions. Some assignments at the same level where you're at. Maybe some stretched assignments, something a little higher that you're not necessarily paid for, but it's for your learning. Could be acting assignments as well. Could be reading. Do you need to read a book? Do you need to go on websites? Do you need to read articles? Do you want to listen to podcasts, read blogs, participate in discussion forums? Those are all acceptable possible activities. Do you need to learn your second language or even practice your second language? I once had 4 weeks of 1 hour a week of practice in English when I was learning English to help me, improve my second language. So those are all acceptable, and everything I didn't mention, as long as it's related and you can prove how it helps you learn, could also be part of your learning plan. Alors, rapidement, des cours payés ou gratuits, que ce soit à l'université, à travers de l'École de la fonction publique, des comités, différents réseaux, aller suivre quelqu'un pendant qu'il travaille au-dessus de son épaule, un mentor, un coach, des affectations à différents niveaux. Ça peut être de la lecture, ça peut être apprendre ou pratiquer votre langue seconde, ça peut être des forums de discussion en ligne, ça peut être un paquet de choses. Ça peut aller aussi loin que votre imagination peut aller, en autant que c'est relié et que vous pouvez démontrer à quel point vous pouvez apprendre de ça.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, we'll move on to questions from the participants. Donc, on va commencer avec les questions. Tu peux poser tes questions dans la langue de votre choix. So you can ask the question in the language of your choice. And we do have quite a few questions. So I'm going to start with the most popular question because you can vote for questions by clicking on the thumbs up button. Alors, vous pouvez voter pour les questions que vous voulez poser en cliquant sur le bouton thumbs up. So the first question, what do you do if your manager is not a good sponsor, despite when providing good documentation of accomplishments? So, maybe this one to you, Natalie, because you talked a lot about that this is a partnership, right? And it is the responsibility of both the employee and the manager. But, what if you as the employee feel that you're doing all you can, but you're not kind of receiving that same level of emphasis or effort from your manager?
It's a great question, and it's not an easy one. I think my answer is possibly manyfold. In the first place, try to have those conversations. Take it outside of the office by the water cooler if you have to. Okay, so it's COVID. You may want to give them a private chat and try it that way, right? But take I mentioned it earlier, take ownership, right? So it's yours. So my manager's not responding the way I needed to. So maybe, is there a peer support I can look to? Is there a network I can go into? Where else can I go? And then we fall into our learning and development plan, right? So it is your career. It is your responsibility to be actively involved in performance management. Now, this is a simple answer. It can get more complicated than that, but it doesn't have to be. Je pense que l'accent, c'est vraiment sur c'est à toi. Fais de ton entente de rendement ce que tu as besoin. Assure-toi que tu le comprends. Puis si ton gestionnaire ne s'engage pas au même niveau que toi, regarde à tes pairs, regarde à ton directeur peut-être. Il y a autre personne avec qui tu peux engager.
Excellent, thank you. So, there's a really interesting question from Alice, and she is in one department right now, and she's interested in moving to another department. So should she discuss this with her supervisor and actually have it documented or written down in her learning plan that she is interested in exploring opportunities with this other department? So, what are your thoughts? I'm going to ask you, Amy, as sort of perhaps having seen, many of these learning plans and having a sense of different departments. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. It's actually one of the things that was in my learning plan at one point when I became interested in further developing in policy expertise and HR policy in particular. It was very clear to me that my career path would lead at some point to OCRO, the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer. So I talked to my manager about what opportunities, one, there would be to increase my interaction with the central agency in order to get a better sense of the work that they were doing and how that might impact the work or help me improve the work that I was doing in my own department. And things like when there were interdepartmental meetings or different committees, I volunteered. And then my manager volunteered me to do some additional work or to attend certain things. And I did. I ended up at Treasury Board at OCRO through a secondment at first, so a temporary arrangement. And then I eventually was appointed over here. So I am absolutely in favor of having those discussions and documenting that type of arrangement as a career goal and as something that you may want to be striving for your career development. Now, granted, managers may have varying responses to this. Some of them are not always as supportive as my management had been in the past around that. But that doesn't mean that you as an individual can't take some initiative as well and reach out and network, and through as Annie said, different communities of practice, organizations that are interrelated to the subject matter will help you take control of your career development if you're not quite in the supportive environment that would be ideal. So.
Excellent, yeah. And Amy is from the Prairie region. I hope that's okay that I share that, right? Aren't you?
No, I'm in Ottawa.
You're in Ottawa now. Have you always been in Ottawa? Oh, okay. So I know our paths had crossed earlier on in our careers. And so, yeah, it was nice to see you kind of land in that central agency because you were in a department before where we had interacted. So we've heard a lot of messages today around taking control of your career and finding those learning opportunities. And so, Annie, there is a question around in situations where an employee may work in a department that is not very supportive of their career goals. How can an employee still find ways to grow? So, you know, perhaps the traditional methods aren't going to work there. Any ideas?
Well, I would say sometimes it's a matter of determination, or sometimes you need to do a little bit of a detour to accomplish the same goals that you could go, you know, on the highway, but the other way, there's usually another street that can bring you there if you don't want to go on the highway. So it's a way of maneuvering, I'd say, a little bit. So first of all, sometimes maybe your manager is not too keen on professional development, but there's always support you can find. Usually it would be via a community of practice like this one or a network like this one. It could be also via your colleagues, I would say, at your own level, people who do the same job as you, maybe in another department, in another branch if you're in a big department. So there's always usually a little pocket of support that exists someplace where you can link yourself to this. So sometimes too, it's a matter, as the others said, to take matter in your own hands, meaning that sometimes learning is a practice on the corner of your desk, but sometimes it's also something you need to do on your own time. It happens. For example, going to university, sometimes you can have a night class, you can go for a summer course or, you know, some other arrangement like that. So there's always a way to find sponsorship, if not from your own manager, maybe some other support system via other managers sometimes that are mentors to you, or throughout like colleagues who have been there a longer time that can give you their tips and tricks. But normally managers understand that you need some sort of a motivation. And apparently, according to all the research that were done related to that, professional development opportunity count for more motivation than even a raise in your salary, for example. So this is really what's driving people. And if you want to keep your teams motivated and engaged, it's definitely something you want to look into. Alors, il y a toujours une façon, quand on ne peut pas prendre l'autoroute, d'aller par la route de côté, celle sur le bord de la mer, si vous venez ici. C'est un peu plus long parfois, ça prend un peu plus de temps, mais on arrive quand même à destination. Et l'avantage d'avoir pris, pas l'autoroute, mais la route de travers, est que sur ce parcours-là, des fois, on fait des découvertes et des trouvailles vraiment intéressantes. Alors, c'est vraiment d'aller voir parfois le soutien, le réseau de soutien vient des communautés de pratique, vient d'une pratique dans laquelle vous investissez sur les forums de discussion en ligne. Peut-être vous vous engagez quand même dans du développement et ça vous garde motivé et actif. Alors, c'est vraiment d'aller chercher le soutien là où il se trouve parce que la job du gestionnaire, c'est de vous aider, mais la job du développement, c'est votre job à vous autres. So developing yourself is your own job. Others are there to support you. So if this person doesn't support you, look who else is there to support you. I'm sure you can find someone else. And if you can go via the highway, take the other road.
Excellent, merci. For sure, in this virtual work setting, I know that employees have access to a lot of opportunities to connect with other public servants and take in learning. Even here today, we're across 3 time zones, and so sometimes there might be opportunities that are outside of your normal workday, but still very relevant to you to achieve your career goals. And I know when I reflect on my career, I remember attending a French language class Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. And so again, you're right, outside of that regular day-to-day, but it was something that was important to me and I was willing to put in that effort. So thank you for that, Annie. So there's another great question that's come in, and it's really related to what we're experiencing right now in the COVID-19 pandemic. So during this period, this participant asks, okay, during pandemic, our performance agreements are not lined up with what we normally do in our day-to-day work. And yet, when we're getting that evaluation, it's this employee's experience that team leaders still continue to evaluate, the employee based on those agreements, which perhaps haven't kept up with the reality of the work that public servants are doing in the COVID context. So any advice there? How do we kind of ensure that, in this current environment when public servants have had to learn new skills, go perhaps paperless or digital, find new ways of connecting and learning from others and new skills, how do we ensure that that gets captured and influence perhaps that process a bit? So I'll come back to you, Nathalie, on this, because I think it really builds on that initial kind of, shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility in the living document, all right? And Amy also mentioned it a while ago. It's crazy times and things have changed. Priorities have changed. Business priorities have changed. What your unit was responsible for, oh my gosh, is it already 13 months ago? 11 months ago, you're not anymore. And so this is a perfect time, by the way. It's February, it's year end. And so before you go into the assessment, have that conversation with your manager. Amy mentioned it a while ago, at the beginning of year, and yeah, okay, so we didn't have the continuous conversation and we didn't dust it off. But here, let's dust it off right now. In the beginning of the year, we thought I'd be responsible for this, but really what I've been doing is this. Reflect that, add those work objectives, name the other ones, put in comments saying that was waylaid, that priority was deferred, that activity didn't happen. Reflect it now, and then your manager is going to be able to do a good assessment of the actual expectations. Yes, they've changed. You did not document them along the way. Do so now before year end. And those self-assessment guide and that self-check on progress, those are things that'll help you question that. But think of it. What have I been doing? It's crazy times, it's pandemics. Oh, guess what? I haven't had access to the PSPM app and whatever. Ask your manager for a print copy. Your manager might have access and is able to download it in a PDF form. So again, there are ways, and you own your sphere. You've got some sphere of control over that. We often forget, well, it's a performance agreement, so my manager's in control. No, you have that shared responsibility. So if you're not able to see your performance agreement right now, ask for a print copy and then make adjustments and say, okay, before you assess me this year, can we have a discussion? Because this is really what has been happening, right? Don't change things to minimize it, but reflect the actual responsibility. Living document, shared responsibility.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I think as so many responsibilities and tasks have emerged in this COVID context, it is important for employees to know what's in that document. And, when you're having that conversation with your manager and they're asking you to take on perhaps a new reporting kind of task, you can actually take that opportunity and say, okay, well, I just want to know where this falls in the list of priorities with my performance agreement, because if I'm working on this, this other task may fall to the bottom or fall off completely in order for me to be able to manage my day. So, you know, really having that familiarity, I think, is excellent advice, and asking for that paper copy if you don't have access to the system is a great tip. So thank you for that. There is another question here that I feel is really interesting, and I'm probably going to ask you, Amy, because it builds on sort of what you were saying, and really letting your manager or supervisor know your interests, right? If you want to go to OCRO, you spoke about your own experience, you shared that, and you found opportunities to get there. Alors, si je suis dans un emploi qui ne me convient pas, est-ce que c'est mon entente de gestion de rendement reflètera cela et me limitera-t-il donc à avancer dans ma carrière? So do you let your manager know, do you reflect that in the documents that this is not a good fit? Or is that going to...
Vraiment, ça dépend de ta relation avec votre gestionnaire. Si vous avez un bon rapport avec des discussions qui sont ouvertes, pour la plupart, les gestionnaires veulent vous aider à développer dans votre carrière et avancer. Et presque tout le temps, si ce n'est pas un bon fit, votre gestionnaire le sait. Et ce n'est pas à leur bénéfice de vous garder quelque part que vous ne pouvez pas avancer dans votre développement quand vous êtes un peu désengagé de votre travail parce que ça ne vous convient pas. Alors, mais dans votre entente de rendement, c'est vraiment les objectifs de travail. L'évaluation est sur qu'est-ce que vos objectifs sont. Alors, votre rendement est basé sur le travail actuel. Oui, il y a d'espace pour des discussions de développement de carrière, l'avancement ou des changements de direction dans votre carrière, mais votre entente de rendement est basé sur votre travail actuel. Votre plan d'apprentissage est une meilleure place pour mettre sur la table que vous intéresse dans quelque chose d'autre, mais votre évaluation doit être basée sur le travail actual. Just to recap a little bit in English, and this is a good question and one that's I think is challenging, is when it's not a good fit, if you don't think it's a good fit, chances are your manager knows that as well. And for the most part, managers don't want people to be unhappy and disengaged in their work. It's really, for them, they want somebody who's engaged, who can excel in the job. So chances are having that discussion is going to be beneficial to everybody because it's going to set the stage for perhaps getting their assistance in finding opportunities or other aspects of the job that might be a better fit. But you do have to be aware that your performance agreement is based on your actual work. The assessment is against the objectives for the job. So yes, there is some openness for some development and maybe some discussion around next steps or career development, but that's really about your learning plan and where that goes, and those discussions go there. So.
Okay, thanks. Annie, with your manager's hat, anything you would like to add on that one? Have you ever had that experience?
Merci Gina. Juste pour ajouter que le fait que tu es peut-être dans un travail qui n'est pas ton best fit ne peut pas être utilisé comme une excuse pour avoir un mauvais rendement. Donc, il faut faire assez attention à ça aussi, de dire « Ah, ben moi, c'est correct, je ne rencontre pas mes objectifs, mais ce n'est pas mon best fit, je ne suis pas bonne dans ce type d'emploi-là. » C'est une attitude un peu dangereuse. Par contre, ce qu'on peut faire, c'est faire le meilleur qu'on peut dans les circonstances. Et comme Amy le disait, toi et le gestionnaire, normalement, vous savez tous les deux que ce n'est pas un bon fit. Alors souvent, si vous êtes capable d'avoir une conversation ouverte et d'amener ça comme sujet de conversation lors des discussions, c'est de dire, ben voici ce qui conviendrait le mieux à mes talents ou à mes compétences ou à mon intérêt. Et souvent, si votre gestionnaire est d'accord, il peut même vous aider à trouver un endroit ailleurs dans la fonction publique, un mouvement latéral où est-ce qu'on aurait un meilleur fit dans la fonction publique en général. Alors ça, c'est très possible d'explorer les avenues, mais il faut juste faire attention là, de ne pas utiliser le mauvais fit comme peut-être une excuse pour ne pas rencontrer nos objectifs. So quickly, Gina, it's really dangerous to use this not good fit as an excuse not to meet your objectives. So try to do as best as you can to reach the objective that you have set for this actual job. And as Amy mentioned, bringing to the conversation that maybe you'd be a better fit elsewhere. And it's the win-win-win advantage in everybody to have you in a department where you would be a better fit, in a type of job where you will be excellent and be able to contribute and be motivated and so on. So it's always a thin line to discuss, but it is definitely possible in the public service to have that kind of conversation where it's nothing personal. It's just, I feel I would be a better person in a different kind of job. And it's totally acceptable to have that conversation.
Thank you. So still lots of great questions in the question and answer, and I know many of them have been answered, but I find this one quite interesting is, you know, what happens if you don't have any time to do any of the learning because of the workload. So how do you frame your discussion with your manager during that end of year performance? Because you had this, you know, performance agreement, you have learning that is to support this kind of performance agreement, and yet, you know, there just hasn't been as much time. We know in the COVID context, a lot of learning opportunities evaporated as there was no face-to-face, and perhaps there was a lag in learning providers to pivot to virtual options. So any advice on that one? And I'm going to open it up to our panels to see who wants to answer this question.
Well, Gina can maybe try a first draft at this one, but again, if the workload is too heavy to allow you the tiniest half a day to attend a training or read something or do participate into an event, you really need to look into that carefully, because I mean, it's again the chicken and the egg. So if you don't take the time for your professional development and for the learning you need to better do your job, you're never going to get better. So it's always going to take you more time or more energy or more effort. So really and you need to see these activities like an investment. So it's not an expense, you're learning, it's an investment in a better performance on your part overall. So if you never invest in this, you're never going to get better, right? Or more efficient, or have a better career, or have a better job, etc. So at some point you need to break the circle by managing the workload or negotiating that workload with your manager in a way to allow you to actually accomplish that plan. And again, I want to come back to the fact that when you both sign that plan, you both agree that it needs to happen. And if it's there, it's because there's a learning need, not just a desire, an actual need for you to get that training or to, you know, learn that specific competency, etc. So at the same time, I've had a lot of employees at the end of the fiscal year that said, oh, well, no, I didn't go. I just didn't have time. Well, when I signed, I was expecting you to take the time and to tell me, this is the week of my course. This is the week of that committee. I have a meeting. I need to go. We agreed on that. Can we push this deadline by a couple of days, by a week, whatever? So I expect this conversation because I signed on the line to say, yes, I'm giving you the time to go, or I'm giving you the funds to go, or something like that. So it goes both ways. But again, when we have that conversation, it is expected that this plan will realize itself. And usually there's an impact if you don't. So what is the cost of doing nothing? What is the cost of status quo? You can also look at it through that lens and explain that to your manager to get their support if you feel there's lack of.
Okay, merci, Annie. And so, we know it's important, and you've just highlighted that, there's a learning need, and there's that expectation when the manager and the employee have signed off on this plan that, the employee will make the time and communicate that, and that the manager or supervisor will support it. But there's a question here that says, they've done their learning plan, they've shared it with their manager, but it didn't end up in the system. So this one is for you, Amy, because I do know that you monitor completion rates of departments and do have lots of familiarity with this system. So how important is it to have the learning plan portion uploaded inside the PMP application? Or, what happens if it's not? And any tips for this participant?
So I'm going to start, and then I expect Natalie's going to jump in as well. So one of the things to remember is that as soon as you create a performance agreement in the system, that your learning plan is prompted right there for your manager to initiate. Now, there are, I believe, and Natalie can correct me, a couple of departments that do not use the system for the PSPM app for tracking learning plans. They have their own processes, which I cannot speak to, but they have processes in place. One of the great things from my perspective about the the PSPM app is that it carries forward your learning plan, the elements that were completed from one year to the next. So there's a reminder when at the end of the year, anything that's not marked as completed is carried forward. So that is one of the things where even if it didn't happen in one fiscal year, if it's still important to you and to your development and linked to your job, it's automatically advanced. You can always take it out if it's no longer relevant, but it does carry forward like that. So getting that tracked is really important so you can have a record of what did and didn't happen, what might have changed throughout the year. You might have put down interest in a particular committee or a particular course or something like that, and sometimes it's may not be offered and may not happen, so it wouldn't apply in that year, or operationally it's not feasible for you to go on the particular day or week, although like Annie had said, scheduling those learning activities early is really important to make sure that there's planned time in your year for that. So I'm going to hand it off to Natalie I think she has some additional important things to say.
On a few things. So yeah, your learning plan is in your public service performance management system, PSPM app. And your manager kicks it off in those departments that do, and I, CRA, CBSA, and other organizations have a separate learning plan. And as Amy said, you can defer, it will carry over. Here's the thing, I feel like a broken record. It's a living document. And so when things have changed, for example, we pivoted or you've changed jobs, you can actually go into your learning plan and mark as not applicable. I'm deferring this. I've completed it. Oh, there's a good one. When you complete something, go into your learning plan, mark it as complete. Remember, take it off the shelf, dust it, use it, it's yours. Now, I do want to make a difference in the way that I explain learning plans in the PSPM app and the real authority to take the learning, because they, in some organizations, are two separate instances. So the learning plan in your PSPM app is a plan. I plan to do this, and if I defer it, I'll defer it, and I'll talk that through with my manager. There are never any surprises because we have regular conversations. But when I seek authority, especially when there's cost or there's time, in some cases, I have to put in a learning request in PeopleSoft. So in some organizations, and in many organizations, those two instances are detached. So your learning plan is a plan. This is what I'm expecting to help me meet my objectives this year or into next year. but my authority to take the training is in another system. So, work with your manager. They know what you need to complete, and they also need to know how they can officially authorize you to take training. So don't forget that there's a few little hiccups along the way, but the thing is, talk to your manager and have those ongoing conversations.
Excellent, thank you. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we only have a couple of minutes left. So what I would like is for each of you to share maybe one or two tips. I suspect Natalie's going to say, talk to your manager, but I know she has a lot of experience and will have some other tips for us. So why don't we just hear from each of you as a takeaway for our participants today, one key message, one kind of nugget that you can pass along with your wealth of experience when it comes to our topic of how to best leverage your learning and performance management plans. So we'll start with you, Amy, and hear what kind of your tips are.
I think from personal experience, the best, most important thing you can do is take ownership of your own career and your own learning. So even if it's not necessarily approved, and building on what a particular course or a particular approach is not necessarily approved for operational or budget reasons, it doesn't mean there isn't another route to gain that particular knowledge or skill, and it may involve some creativity on your part, but showing initiative and taking ownership are really the things that are going to help you advance in your career and get the development and the learning that you need.
Okay, thank you. Annie?
I would invite you when building your learning plan to always include three things: what you want to learn, what you want to do, and what you want to teach. So it's the learn, do, teach approach. So I invite you to always cover those three areas, simply because they would allow you normally to strive professionally and to cover your own professional development. And those three are also at the base of a learning organization. So each and every one of us can learn something, want to do something to accomplish our learning, and teach something to someone else. This is the base of the learning organization, and that would enable the whole public service to action the system of learning organization. So by going also into the teaching zone, you go more in depth into the way you can deliver learning, because as people who have taught anything know, when you teach something to someone else, it's exactly the highest level of learning that you can accomplish. It brings you to the next level, and that's where you really master. Il y a toujours quelque chose que vous pouvez enseigner à quelqu'un. Soyez créatif. Donc, avant, par exemple, d'aller suivre un cours sur comment faire des étiquettes dans Word, regardez qui dans votre ministère peut vous enseigner comment faire des étiquettes dans Word. Et je prends un exemple comme ça, mais ça peut être n'importe quoi. Il y a définitivement quelqu'un dans votre système à quelque part qui peut aussi vous enseigner quelque chose. Et en enseignant ce qu'on sait déjà aux autres, ça nous fait vraiment grandir. C'est très motivant aussi d'enseigner aux autres. Alors, la clé du succès d'un plan d'apprentissage, dans mon expérience, inclut ces trois choses: apprendre, faire et enseigner. Learn, do, teach. Think about that when building your learning plans.
Excellent. Merci, Annie. Et Nathalie?
I've just started a job and I don't know what's expected of me. Knock on your manager's door and go and ask. And that is the basis of your performance agreement.
Excellent advice, right? Really how to build that relationship with your supervisor and manager, ask those questions, be open to their guidance, their suggestions, and hopefully that will build that partnership to move forward. So I would like to thank our panelists today for sharing their advice, their tips, their experiences. I'd like to thank all the participants for joining us. Please make sure to register for the next 3 Federal Youth Network Virtual Learning Series events. Assurez-vous de vous inscrire à nos 3 prochains événements, le 9, 16 et 23. de février. I believe that's not, we're into March, so I'm sure there are going to be some additional dates for the March sessions. And you may find those registration links in the chat space. I know there were some questions that we did not get to today. But please, I believe our panelists did share some of their contact information. I did see I had one participant reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to connect with all of you. And I believe Marcella just dropped the registration link and confirmed that those dates are correct, but it's the month of March, not February. With that, it is almost approaching 1:30 in my time zone, and depending on where you sit and work, I wish you a great rest of day, and take care, stay connected, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.